Hey everyone, welcome back to the Critic-Verse. Today we're going to be reviewing Superman Lois Season 3, Episode 7, titled Forever and Always. Now, before we get to the review, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel to help us grow and build a community here. And don't forget to leave your own thoughts on the episode or any additional thoughts you might have to my review to open a dialogue. Now, on to the review. This episode is titled Forever and Always, which is a reference to the phrase used by Pia and Bruno as a way of professing their love for one another, as this episode has flashback cutaways to explore the pair before they got to this point, and also how Bruno took over Intergang with Pia's help. Now, this is the first time we truly get to see Lois experiencing the negative effects of her chemo treatment the night before her fourth treatment, which Pia noted as the one that made her lose her taste buds. The boys, well mostly Jonathan, feels Lois and Clark are keeping them in the dark, and mostly because Lois tries to maintain a brave face in front of the boys. John Henry is making dinner to meet Mateo for the first time, or he will be when he starts getting ready. And it surprises me that he hasn't done a background check on Mateo already, but he promised Nat he would be cool, Dad, because Nat is really freaking out about this dinner. It seems like the town hall reconstruction is Lana's white whale, as she keeps talking about it in most of her storylines this season. But Chrissy comes in to pick up her order, and it seems like a normal order to me, but given the look on Lana and Sarah's face, it must be Kyle's signature order. And Sarah gives her snarky attitude towards Chrissy this time, but Lana disapproves of it. Also, she states the age difference between Kyle and Chrissy, which was only stated once before when Kyle realized how old Chrissy was when Dean first became mayor. As Lois talks about how supportive Clark has been, we get Pia referencing her husband while keeping his name out of it, but you can tell Lois notices that and is intrigued by it. In the first flashback we get to see Bruno and Pia having a secret love affair under Boss Moxie, the former leader of Intergang. And it also confirms a previous theory I had that the show is changing Bruno's backstory, because in the comics, Boss Moxie is his father, but they don't have that connection this time around. Clark, while waiting for Lois, hears the boys in the fortress. Then we get to see Jordan and Jonathan talking to Laura, and Laura is being questioned by Jonathan and asks if there's anything in the fortress that can help Lois. And this was already brought up by Sam in episode 3 when Clark and Lois are revealing to everyone else that Lois has cancer. But Clark said there wasn't anything in the fortress to help Lois, but Laura tells the boys that they didn't even check. Clark interrupts them and asks what the boys are doing there. And this doesn't really make any sense in the story, because Clark said at the beginning of this season and at the end of last season that this was supposed to be a fortress for the whole family, so why do they even need his permission to be there? Plus, he also says he was going to find a way for the non-flying members of the family to get there, but that's never shown, as Jonathan is brought there and taken away by Jordan. Also, something to note, this is the most Jonathan and Clark have talked to each other all season so far. But Clark sends them away after questioning why isn't he using Kryptonian tech science to save Lois. The meta joke from Pia that Jordan and John look alike, considering John used to be played by a different actor, and in the previous seasons they were always considered fraternal twins. And now John's new actor looks a lot more like Jordan's actor Alex Griffin, and they could be considered more traditional twins even though they still have their differences in looks. Lois's famous gut is telling her Pia is hiding something. Then we get our second flashback. Bruno is pitching his plans for South Metropolis and his remodel, which Boss Moxie shuts down, but we know in present day Bruno went forward with it and it's worked out pretty well for him. Lois implies a connection between Pia and Bruno, which puts Pia on the defensive, and she then goes forward to shut Lois out of her final treatment. Lois's gut is right on the money, but she doubts it because of the chemo. But Clark, being the supportive husband that he is, goes to talk to Bruno, but not as Superman, as Clark Kent reporter. We then get our third flashback that takes place in the same place that Bruno calls home now, which turns out to be the former office above the factory that gave his mother cancer, which contains an elevator that connects to an abandoned subway line where his secret lab really is. Unlike how I previously thought that it was below Hobbs Bay, but he's probably keeping that far away from the cancer center just to not have any connections above ground. Clark flexes his reporter skills and he infers that Bruno has made investments that are all profitable except his funding into Hobbs Bay and his cancer research, and questions the reason behind it, which Bruno defends on just wanting to help people to make himself look better PR-wise. Jordan and Jonathan are on opposite sides of debating on how their parents are hiding things from them, which Jordan is on Clark's side in stark contrast to the previous episode when it came to his training. But John goes snooping and finds the will that Lois created also in the previous episode. Sarah just seems to transfer her mean girl energy onto Chrissy, and Chrissy calls her on it, but Sarah realizes that Chrissy is right and agrees to hang out with her without Kyle around. Mateo meets John Henry, and something interesting I noticed is that Mateo calls John Henry Mr. Johnson. And for the life of me, I didn't understand why he called him that and thought it was an error on the writer's part or the actors. And they just kept it in because it was their best take. Until someone reminded me that that was John Henry's alias. He and Nat are supposed to be, well, at least to the outside world, Henry and Natalie Johnson, and not the Irons family. I didn't remember him having an alias because he's mostly around people that know his real backstory, so they just call him by his real name anyway. The majority of the humor in this episode comes from how John Henry reacts to Nat actually liking a boy. He said he would be cool, Dad, but once he saw the way that the two of them looked at each other at dinner, cool Dad left the building or either never showed up at all. Lois apologizes to Pia for chasing a story, and she notes that she thinks of Pia as an actual friend, and that they should be friends even after her cancer treatment ends. And Pia says that they shouldn't be friends given their backgrounds, but Lois doesn't get the full context of what Pia is saying because she lacks that context. Sarah, who was previously grossed out by Chrissy and Kyle's age difference, realizes that Chrissy is a lot cooler than she thought when she found something in her purse before the movies. Clark's interview with Bruno takes a turn, and Clark is able to infer that Bruno is projecting his feelings onto Clark for his own wife. So this is personal for him, even though he admits that it's more business and more altruistic than he wants it to look. Pia reveals to Lois she was sort of a plant to make Lois think Hobbs Bay was on the up and up. But Bruno shows up with Clark and the pieces are finally put out in the open, and it's revealed that Bruno is the husband that Pia was always referring to, at least to Lois, which leaves her in disbelief. We get a bell ringing ceremony for Pia, and I thought cancer patients only do this when they're confirmed in remission, but it turns out the bell ringing ceremony is done whenever a patient reaches the end of their planned treatment. And it was a tradition started by a U.S. Navy admiral who's receiving radiation therapy. His name was Irv Lemoine in 1996, who was treated for head and neck cancer, and the bell ringing ceremony was a Navy tradition because ringing a bell signifies when the job was done. John confronts and apologizes to Mateo after some coaching from Lana, who notices Chrissy and Sarah getting along and leaves, but Sarah notices her as well. The boys confront Clark and Lois about the will they found, and man, Michael Bishop has his best line delivery so far this season. He goes on about how Clark's platitudes on hope only goes so far, but hope doesn't keep humans like him and Lois alive. And it didn't work for John and Martha Kent, and hope doesn't cure cancer. Man, I wanted them to give Jonathan something more, and he killed this line delivery. This line indicates more of how John feels towards his family, mostly his father and brother, about how he's not Kryptonian like they are. And he also alluded to this in the previous episode. And Clark and Lois don't want to use Kryptonian tech because they say it wouldn't be fair to use it and to not help anyone else. Which is a weird kind of argument in my opinion. Clark and Jonathan also have their first one-on-one scene so far this season, as Clark tells Jonathan that he's just as much Kryptonian as Jordan is. And that's nice and all, but so far the show has expressed that that's just words, given what John has had to go through. In the final flashback, Boss Moxie has Pia eliminate all the members, at least the higher-ups, that sided with Bruno. And after using a heartfelt plea to Pia and their special phrase, she turns on Boss Moxie and kills him with her voice. It's also revealed that the two have a son, and it's none other than our favorite romantic, Mateo. It was obvious Bruno was Mateo's father, but the mother, at least to me, the identity was still questionable, but not anymore. And he wants his parents to meet Nat. Okay, now this was another great episode for the show's junior season. There was some contradictions, or at least some elements that didn't mesh well with previous story points. At least for me, in the first episode, Chrissy acts like she's an old fart compared to the teens at Jordan and John's birthday party. But it's shown that Chrissy has edibles in her purse and goes to Coachella every year, which makes Sarah realize how cool Chrissy is and does help them to bond, which was nice to see at least. In the previous episode, we got a major focus on Lana and Kyle's other daughter, Sophie, and she talked about feeling left out and how everyone forgets her, and they promised not to do that again. But this episode, she wasn't shown or mentioned at all. Even when Lana and Sarah are both home late at night and go out to set off fireworks, and she's just not involved in it at all. They seem to be setting up something for Jonathan. At least I hope they are, because they keep on giving him story beats and then taking it away and giving it to Jordan. I'm really just hoping that this is all a build-up to Jonathan getting powers, because I really want both the sons of Superman to have powers, because I think it'll work when they both have powers in tandem instead of making Jordan feel more special compared to John. But okay, I can't wait to see where this story goes next and what character connections get revealed in next week's episode. Because if you know, you know. Okay, so thanks for joining me in the Critic-Verse. See you next time.